Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is Jim Butcher, New York Times best-selling author of the Harry Dresden series, the Codex Alera, and very soon something new. Welcome, Jim.
Hi.
Okay, Jim, getting to that something new. Why steampunk? Why now?
Steampunk is really hot right now. And as I get out to the conventions, I would be hitting the convention floor and going shopping with everybody else, and just admiring the costuming and the enthusiasm for the genre. And it was one of the things that I started getting interested in, and finally said, you know what, maybe I should try and write something. And I had several projects that I was looking at starting next. So I put several of them together and floated them past my beta readers about a year ago to see which one kind of got me the best reaction. And I got the strongest reaction out of the steampunk series. So I decided to go with that one just because it had I think the most solid characters, the most solid story base, and had gotten the best response from the readers.
And the opening scene had a rather interesting origin story of its own.
Indeed. I was driving home from a live-action role-play event. I was driving home in my minivan, and I had a van full of sleeping teenagers. And as I was driving home from between Lawrence, Kansas and Independence, Missouri, I'm driving across Kansas Prairie. We had a good old-fashioned Kansas lightning storm came marching across the plain just as the sun was coming up. And so the top of the storm is kind of illuminated by the sun, and the bottom is this huge, dark, gloomy, monstrous black mass with these giant forks of lightning coming down as it advanced over the plain. It was coming along parallel to the track I was driving, or perpendicular to. And so as I was racing along the storm, the CD that happened to be in the CD player at the moment was, at that time, was a Nine Inch Nails' Downward Spiral, which is kind of a very industrial sounding album, lots of very mechanical noises to it. And so as this lightning storm's coming closer and closer, and I'm driving faster and faster and turning the Nine Inch Nails up louder and louder, the first scene from this book kind of pops into my mind, and it's the one that's in the first chapter as I'm driving along. And it was a very interesting morning for me. It was one of those mornings where, I don't know, I guess I was accessing my creative side because I was just so tired and then fearful.
Fearful helps sometimes, yes.
And in any case, that was the origin of the steampunk universe, was this lightning storm. And then I started building, from this first chapter that appeared in my head, I sort of started building outward for the rest of the universe, and that was where the story world came from.
And it's going to be called The Cinder Spires?
The Cinder Spires.
Yes. You mentioned in response to the first question, your beta readers. You're rather unusual among traditionally published authors in that you have a really vibrant and large beta reading group, because I remember you invited input on your stories way back in 2005, 2000. You're still doing it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How big is the group now?
Right now there are 14 people in the beta reading group. There are new people that get added in every year, and there's some folks that drop out every year just because of, they have life too. And but they are the ones who help me as I go along. They kind of give me an as I write reaction to the writing, because it gets published to the beta readers chapter by chapter as I finish it, and I
like a serial.
Indeed, chapter by chapter. And that's one of the reasons, I think is one of the reasons that my novels have kind of been the sorts of things that have people staying up late reading them, is because I write them in order to drive the beta readers insane. It's like, when I get to the end of a chapter, it's like, well, what is going to make the beta readers just absolutely scream in frustration at the end of this chapter? That's where I need to end the chapter, and then we'll start the next chapter a few days later. But I feel bad for them. I call it the beta foo asylum, because they've got to sit through all this stuff. There are people who complain. It's like, I had to wait this whole line for the next book. It's like, well, what if that had happened to you 50 times during the course of the book? And that's what I kind of have to do to the beta readers. Every chapter I try and give them something to go, but I want to know what happens next. But you don't get to know what happens next. I'm still working on it. Don't look.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm gonna take you a bit on the Wayback Machine right now.
Okay.
Way back in 2004, when we last talked with a microphone in front of you,
right.
You said that you had a roughly 20-book, plan for the Harry Dresden series and a really good idea how it was going to end.
Yes.
How well has Harry played along with that plan?
Just fine so far.
So far?
It's been the supporting characters that have been throwing things off. Dresden's doing okay.
Yeah.
All these other people. What I need to do is put on a Joss Whedon mask and start threatening them. Listen, people get back into line, you're going to get axed.
Do you think it'll work?
Joss Whedon mask. No, it won't.
I mean, in your universe, they can always come back.
That's true. But so far, the story's pretty much on track. We're still going to do 20-ish books of the Dresden Files, kind of like the case books like we've seen so far, and then a big old apocalyptic trilogy at the end. But yeah, I mean, things have been working out so well, sticking to the outline that I made when I was a college student, planning a series, that I'm a little superstitious about deviating from it now. I mean, it seems to be working. It's not broken. Don't fix it.
Yes. I think everybody would agree that it is working very well, and please do not break it. As you've been going along with the series, and maybe you've touched on this, what has been the greatest challenge? Your minor characters, or has there been something else about the book that you have found unexpectedly the series that you found unexpectedly challenging?
The most serious challenge is keeping the continuity of the story world, keeping that in check. I've got this group of very dedicated beta readers, some of whom, and the thing is that what I've discovered is that fans keep track of this so much better than a writer ever could. If only because fans, for the most part, they just get to see the final version. A writer, writes a draft and then another draft, and then he's got an edited copy that goes back and forth between him and the editor, and then there's a line edit, and then there's a proof to do. So maybe there's 7 or 8 slightly different versions of the book that he's seen before the book goes to print. So there are lots of small details that, and that's fine when it's 1, 2, 3 books. Maybe you can sort of keep track, but I'm working on book 15 of the Dresden Files here, so that's about 85 slightly different versions of books, and a lot of times details will slip my mind, and the beta readers have been absolutely critical in helping me keep that stuff straight, because they'll jump right on it and nail me, nail me to the wall with it. It's no, you can't do that. You did this exact different thing. That character's eyes aren't this color; they're that color, and that has been really an enormous boon to me. It's vastly annoying, and I could not survive without it. So it's one of those things that I'm very, very grateful to have. It's like, oh, it drives me crazy. Thank you.
Yes. Are you going to turn them loose on something like a World of Harry Dresden book when the series is done?
Oh, you mean like some kind of compilation?
Well, no, like a Bible.
There's been talk of a Dresden Bible,
yes.
And I don't know if it's something that will eventually get done. Frankly, I think the role-playing game made a really, really good one. There's 2 books to the role-playing game. It's called Your Story, Our World, and the Our World book is basically just an encyclopedic reference of the Dresden Files, of all the different characters and so on. I will go to it myself when I'm doing research. There, and the Dresden Files Wikipedia, which the fans keep up, because again, they're so much better at it than I am.
Okay, when I was listening to your panel today, I did not realize that the Codex Alera, was written on a dare. Was it really based on Pokemon?
Yeah, it was written on a bet, yeah. And it was the Del Rey Online Writers Workshop in 1998, 1999. It was before I'd gotten anything published or sold, and so I was just one more unpublished loudmouth on the internet. And there was a bunch of us having a big argument on the write-in list, and it was one of those discussions where you just sort of hit caps lock, you hit reply, and then caps lock and start typing. It was kind of one of those talks. And one side of the discussion was championing the idea that the grand idea was what was important in a book. And if you had a great enough idea, no matter how badly you wrote it, your book would be successful. And they said, look at Jurassic Park. Bring dinosaurs back. It's a great idea. And that was their example, not mine. The other side of the argument was saying that no matter how old or worn out the story or how many times it's been redone, if you come at it, if the writer comes at it and gives it his own perspective and his own spin and his own creative uniqueness, he can do that story again and make it awesome. How many times have we seen good versions of Romeo and Juliet? And I was on the writer side. And so this discussion went back and forth and back and forth, and finally the guy who was leading the charge on the idea side said, "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Why don't you let me give you a bad idea, and then you can write it, and you could show us how it works, since you're such a great writer." And you know, I was in my 20s and I didn't know too much, and I was a loudmouth on the internet, so I said, "Oh, you know what? I tell you what, why don't you give me 2 terrible ideas, and I will use them both." And the guy said, "All right, fine. First idea is Lost Roman Legion. I'm sick of Lost Roman Legions. All the Lost Roman Legions should have been found by now. That's the first idea is Lost Roman Legion." And I said, "What's the second idea?" He says, "Pokemon. Tired of Pokemon." And so I took those 2 ideas and I started putting together a story world. And I went and found out about Lost Roman Legion, and I found out basically what the Ninth Hibernian Legion was composed of. You know, it was about half Romans and about half German mercenaries. And I said, well, what's going to happen to these guys when they got lost? They went to where? The land of the Pokemon. Okay, great. And so I went and started examining Pokemon, which is itself an idea mashup. Pokemon takes the Shinto religion, where spirits of the divine live in all natural things and have a certain amount of power, and you should respect them. And so a mountain has a giant spirit, a giant kami in it, and a pebble has a little tiny one, and you should respect them equally. But if you disrespect the pebble, it's kind of tiny. What's going to happen? And they take that idea, and then Pokemon mashes it with professional wrestling, and then that's where Pokemon comes from. So I decided to take the Shinto part of that idea, and I put all these spirits and the natural everything in this world that they went to, which I named Alera, and then I've got to have a name for these things. And I was watching Big Trouble in Little China in the background. It was just the part where one of the old Chinese advisors is saying, all tension in the universe, all movement in the universe is caused by tension between positive and negative furies. And I said, ooh, furies, that's a great word. I mean, it's even Greco-Roman. I've got to use that. Yeah. So I called them furies. And so that was where I started. I took this Roman legion, I dropped them off in this world where these furies are, and I gave them 1,000 years to kind of ferment a society. And so they developed this kind of very bifurcated society that was about half of it was centered around these great big cities, kind of Roman-style city settlements, and the other half was German freeholds that were out in the countryside. And that was how I built that world.
Okay. Are we ever going to see that space opera of yours?
The space opera, we'll have to see. It's still on the table, and I still feel bad. I've got my protagonist who's been, you know, had just ejected from his ship, which had a reactor core that was going critical, and in a decaying orbit over the surface of the moon with a solar flare expected at any moment, and he's been there for, I don't know, like 11 years now.
That poor guy.
I know.
You know, he's just growing older and older and older.
Sorry, Glenn Cannon, you're still floating in that decaying orbit. Don't worry,
I'll get to you eventually.
I'll get back there sometime.
Okay. I presume that the Cinder Spires is what you're working on now, right? It's occupying you you're full of, that and Harry are occupying you full-time.
Indeed they are. Right now I've got to get the next Dresden Files book in because it's due literally in about 35 minutes, something like that, about half an hour.
Okay.
60. It's due in 16 minutes.
Okay.
It probably won't be in quite on time, but I'm about 70% of the way through it. I'm going to finish it up in the next couple of weeks.
So, anything you'd like to add before we close?
I just want to thank everybody who's been a reader of the books over the years. My readership has been really much more. You guys have gone out and pushed my books on more people. I don't know whether to use drug dealer similes to say what you've been doing or cult similes to say what you've been doing, but either are kind of appropriate. And thank you very much for doing so. I've got some of the coolest readers in the world.